Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a part of history that your philosophy professor definitely glossed over. Not Zeus, not Socrates. No, tonight we're exploring how the ancient Greeks really dealt with demons, and in the process, kind of invented therapy by accident. And wait until you find out what they did with snakes, olive oil, and musical instruments to quote-unquote fix nightmares. If you're enjoying our sleepy history journeys, I'd really appreciate a quick like or even a subscribe. It helps motivate me to create more valuable content for your viewing pleasure. And hey, I'm always curious where you're listening from. Drop a comment with your city and what time it is for you. I love seeing this strange little bedtime cult of ours grow across the globe. Now dim the lights, and let's drift back to a time when your mental health was treated with wine, chanting, and a firm slap on the bum from a toga-wearing philosopher. You are not yourself. At least that's what the elders tell you. One too many emotional outbursts, and they've decided your soul is no longer in charge. Something else has moved in. A divine affliction, a cursed wind, maybe a ghost from last season's failed harvest. Whatever it is, it's making you weep into figs and shout at shadows. So they take you by the arm, gently, politely, and escort you to the temple. Not a hospital, a temple. Because in ancient Greece, emotional problems weren't a sign of weakness, they were signs of possession. You're led past the columns into the cool, dark corridors where priests whisper things like purification and soul alignment. You don't know whether to be afraid or relieved, because for the first time in days, someone actually believes you. You're bathed in sacred water. You're told to fast. You're rubbed in warm oils while a man plays a flute that sounds like bees dying in a bottle. Then they put you to sleep beside a statue of a snake god. You're told that when you wake up, your dreams will be the key to your healing. And this is just day one. For the ancient Greeks, emotional healing was a group project involving gods, rituals, music, herbs, awkward public weeping, and the occasional therapeutic vomiting session. And somehow, despite the chaos, it worked. Because at the heart of it all was a very old, very strange idea that healing wasn't just about your body, it was about your soul. And your soul, it needed attention, and occasionally a full moon ceremony featuring goat entrails and synchronized chanting. As your journey continues, you'll encounter philosophers who think your sadness is caused by too much black bile, priests who want you to sleep in a snake pit, and musicians who swear their flute can fix your broken heart. Through it all, you'll sweat, cry, chant, purge, and maybe, just maybe, feel something shift. Not because the gods have cured you, but because someone finally listened, and in ancient Greece that was therapy enough. You wake up before sunrise drenched in sweat. Not from the heat, but from the dream. Again. It's the one where you're falling through a cavern filled with bees, and your mother's voice echoes from a fish's mouth. You tell no one, not yet. Because in ancient Greece, a dream like that could mean many things, and none of them are good. You haven't smiled in 3 weeks. You no longer feel hunger. You sometimes forget your own name, but not the weight in your chest. It's heavy, sour, like spoiled wine sealed beneath your ribs. The neighbours are starting to notice. You mutter to yourself in public. You weep when figs are too ripe. One time, you laughed for 6 minutes straight when a cat tripped over a sandal, and then cried for another 6. You're not sad, you're possessed. Because in ancient Greece, emotions didn't live inside of you. They weren't chemical imbalances or unresolved trauma. Number, they were gods, minor spirits, daimones. Leap was the spirit of grief, mania, the madness, penthos, deep mourning. And you? You were just a meat puppet they borrowed for a while. The elders say it started after you walked past the temple without bowing, or maybe after you stepped on a sacred beetle. There are whispers, mostly from your aunt, that a jealous neighbour cursed you after you beat him in a melon-picking contest last autumn. Classic melon feud behaviour. The local priest is more generous. He places a hand on your shoulder, squints at the sky, and declares, "This one is ridden with leap. The grief goddess has climbed inside." You don't remember inviting her. Still, the diagnosis is somehow a comfort. Because now, your feelings aren't your fault. They're someone else's problem. Literally. This is where the therapy begins. You're instructed to offer tribute, something modest, a sliver of honeycomb, a carved image of a dove, a short poem about why you're sorry. You recite it under the moonlight with your eyes closed. You're told to bathe in cold spring water while thinking only pure thoughts. You're told to avoid sex, pickled garlic, and contact with anyone named Theon. Then you wait. Because healing, in this era, is more about appeasement than adjustment. Behind the scenes, ancient Greek culture had developed a surprisingly structured system for these spiritual breakdowns. The Orphic cults believed the soul was constantly at war with its fleshly prison, and any emotional imbalance was a sign that the inner war was being lost. The Homeric poets saw wrath and sorrow as literal gods descending upon a man. In the Iliad, even Achilles isn't angry. Menace, divine rage, is what enters him like a spear. This belief served a strange kind of emotional realism. You weren't seen as weak for feeling too much. You were seen as touched. And so your entire community rallies to help you expel the daemon. A goat is sacrificed on your behalf. Not a big goat, your depression isn't that dramatic, but a decent mid-sized one. The blood is painted onto a stone near your favourite tree. You're asked to chant a prayer while burning dried rosemary and fennel. The scent sticks to your hair for days. Next comes the social therapy. You're invited to a small gathering in the village centre. There's wine, flute music, and a man in his 60s dramatically reading a poem about the death of his parrot. Everyone weeps. Everyone cheers. Everyone understands. This is catharsis, literally purging in Greek. And they believed it was necessary for survival. Tragedies weren't just for entertainment. They were rituals designed to drain the poisonous emotions from the soul. Watching Oedipus Rex wasn't just drama. It was soul maintenance. And so, in your own way, your grief becomes a story performed in a communal ritual. You're told to write a short play about how Lipa entered your life. You do. It's bad. But people laugh, then cry, then applaud anyway. One person offers you a date fruit. Another gives you a small rock for protection. The gods are pleased, or at least entertained. And slowly, your symptoms soften. Your appetite returns. The dreams, while still weird, feel less heavy. The neighbours stop muttering. You're invited to dinner again. Whether it was the sacrifice, the herbs, the sweat, the community, or the sense that your feelings mattered, something shifted. And perhaps that's the genius of the system. Because even if Leap was never real, believing she was gave your pain a shape, a name, a purpose. And once you could see her clearly, you could show her the door. You're not better, but you are beginning. And in ancient Greece, that was therapy enough. You haven't truly slept in days. You've dozed, sure. The kind of half-sleep that tastes like iron and regret. The kind where you wake up more exhausted than you were when you went to bed. You've tried counting goats, counting olives, counting the regrets in your life. None of it works. Your brain won't stop echoing. So you do what any emotionally possessed ancient Greek would do when plagued by restless visions, sadness, or gastrointestinal anxiety. You go to the temple of Asclepius. He's the god of healing. Not war wounds or broken bones. Those are battlefield business. Asclepius deals with the quiet, unsettling things. Dreams that won't leave you alone. Chest pressure that feels like your soul forgot to exhale. That creeping suspicion that your bladder has emotional trauma. You arrive barefoot as tradition demands. Your tunic is clean, your mind less so. A priest with olive oil skin and eyebrows like hawk wings greets you silently. He says nothing, just places a hand on your forehead and nods solemnly. as if confirming something you already feared. You've been chosen for enchemesis, temple sleep therapy, and yes, you will be sleeping next to snakes. To be fair, they're sacred snakes, harmless supposedly. They symbolise rebirth and healing, and probably wouldn't bite you unless provoked, or unless they had a really bad day. You're shown into the abaton, the quiet inner sanctum of the temple. The floors are cool marble, the walls are lined with dedications, carved reliefs showing people being healed by divine intervention. One guy's intestines are literally being stitched back together by a snake with human hands. You try not to overthink it. You're instructed to lie down on a woven mat, head toward the east, heart facing upward. A priest lights incense that smells like wet pine needles and recites a slow chant designed to summon dreams, or at the very least keep the snakes calm. Then comes the oil massage. Yes, this was standard. The idea was to soften the body so the soul could loosen its grip, as if your soul was a stubborn knot in your spine that just needed enough kneading to let go of its traumas. As you drift into something between sleep and trance, you're told to prepare for a dream. Because here, dreams are not random. They are divine messages, blueprints, diagnosis charts from the gods, and whatever dream you have tonight, it will be interpreted as your cure. Historically speaking, Asclepian dream therapy wasn't fringe. It was a major institution. There were temples dedicated to it across Greece, from Epidaurus to Pergamon. Pilgrims travelled for days to seek dream healing, often bringing their ailments, physical, emotional, even spiritual. They underwent fasting, purification rituals, abstinence, and yes, sometimes hallucinogenic herbs. Not for fun, for clarity. Now it's your turn. You fall asleep to the sound of flute music and the soft hiss of a nearby snake adjusting itself beside a torch. Your dream comes swiftly. You're running across a meadow made entirely of bread. A goat is chasing you with a scroll in its mouth. You stop. It reads, "Forgive the sea." You cry. The goat hugs you. Then you both eat the meadow. You wake up confused, sweaty, oddly hungry. The priest greets you with his usual gravitas. You relay the dream. He listens, nodding solemnly, then declares, "You're burdened by guilt, likely from something aquatic. Perhaps you wronged a fish. The goat is your conscience." He prescribes sea salt foot baths, 3 days of eating nothing that swims, and a poem about forgiveness written in charcoal on a smooth stone. You do it all. You still feel mildly insane, but somehow a bit lighter. As if the act of being seen, of being taken seriously, of having your weirdness interpreted rather than dismissed, has peeled away a layer of your fog. And here's the thing. Most scholars believe this entire process worked not because of divine snake energy, but because it was one of the earliest forms of talk therapy, or rather, dream therapy, which just so happened to involve naps, community support, and bizarre but emotionally validating rituals. You weren't cured by science, you were healed by story, by being part of one, by having yours heard, and by having your pain turned into a mythic riddle worth solving. And that in ancient Greece was all anyone really wanted, to know that their suffering meant something. So you thank the priest, you thank the snake. You leave the temple with a piece of your nightmare turned into peace of mind. You'll be back. Maybe not for the goat dream, but for something deeper. Because in this world, healing is a journey, and your dreams are the map. You've felt better lately. Not great, but better. The snake dream helped, somehow. Your breath comes easier now, and the weight in your chest has shifted from immovable boulder to grumpy hedgehog. Progress. But there's still something. You wake each morning feeling like you forgot to finish a sentence in a dream. There's a tightness in your joints. Your appetite comes and goes like a temperamental wind. Your friends have stopped calling you cursed, which is nice, but now they just call you mildly concerning. So you're sent, with some reluctance, to undergo catharsis, No, not the emotional release from tragic poetry. This one's more literal. We're talking ritual purification. Because in ancient Greece, mental and emotional disturbances were often believed to be the result of spiritual pollution, miasma. Not dirt you could scrub off with soap and water, but invisible contamination caused by moral imbalance, death proximity, impure acts, or sometimes just walking too close to someone having a bad day. And once your soul was polluted, no amount of prayer would fix it. You had to clean it, like a vase smeared with ghost grease. You arrive at the temple outskirts, not the big showy one, but the smaller sanctuary where purification rites are performed. There's no crowd, no music, just a flat field, a carved altar, and a priest with an expression that suggests he's seen some things. You're told to disrobe, not all the way, just enough to expose your limbs. The windows of the soul's toxins, apparently. You stand barefoot on a stone slab and the ritual begins. First, water. Spring water, to be precise. It's cold, shockingly cold, poured directly over your head while the priest mutters a prayer to Hestia, goddess of the hearth, which is ironic because you're currently freezing. Then, fire, not directly. A brazier is lit nearby, and fragrant herbs, bay leaf, myrrh, dried thyme, are tossed in. The smoke curls around you, invasive and intimate. You're told to breathe it in deeply and exhale the filth of your ancestors. You try. It mostly just smells like overcooked salad. Then comes the third step. The priest presents a chicken. You blink. The chicken looks at you. You look at the chicken. Neither of you is thrilled. This is a periskilma, a ritual in which an animal, often a bird, is passed over the body to absorb the impurity. The chicken is waved over your head, across your arms, under your feet. It clucks nervously. You cluck nervously. The whole thing feels absurd, until the priest whispers, "This bird will carry your sorrow away." And somehow, you believe him. When it's done, the chicken is taken away. Don't ask where, and you're given fresh linen and a fig. You eat in silence. Historically, these purification rites weren't fringe oddities. They were integral to Greek religious and psychological practice. Soldiers performed them before battle, orators before speeches, mothers after childbirth. Even Socrates, when condemned to death, requested a rooster be sacrificed to Asclepius. Scholars believe it was his symbolic final act of soul cleansing. And the logic was profound in its own odd way. Before healing could begin, pollution had to be removed. Before clarity came cleansing. This is not the end of your journey, but you do feel clearer, lighter somehow, as if the ritual didn't fix you, but carved a small window in the fog. You start noticing things again, the way the olive trees rustle when it rains, the smell of citrus in the market, the satisfying crunch of burnt barley. These moments, once dulled by shadow, now arrive sharp and bright. Maybe it's the smoke, maybe it's placebo, maybe the chicken did eat your depression and is off writing poetry in a field somewhere. Whatever the reason, you begin to rejoin life. And here lies the true purpose of these ancient rituals, not just to chase away invisible demons, but to reweave you back into the world. Because in ancient Greece, healing wasn't a solitary act. It was a reintroduction to meaning. Your next steps will not be easy. The mind's terrain is rocky. But today, you are not drowning. Today, you are clean. Tomorrow, you begin again. This time with the guidance of fire, water, and possibly another chicken. You've done the temple thing. You've been oiled, smoked, bathed, and partially exorcised by poultry. You've slept next to snakes. You've dreamed of melancholic goats and had your feelings diagnosed via interpretive incense. And yet, you're still not right. It's not as loud as it was before. The chaos in your chest now hums rather than howls. But it's still there, like a wine stain beneath a fresh tunic. You go through your daily motions. You eat. You barter. You nod during conversations even when you aren't fully sure what anyone's saying. You laugh at jokes and hope no one notices that it sounds like someone else. People tell you look better, but your insides aren't convinced. So naturally your cousin drags you to see a woman known only as the auntie. No one knows her real name. She's not a priestess. She doesn't work for the temples. She doesn't chant or wear linen robes. But she has teas, 17 of them to be exact, each one for a different kind of sadness. There's a tea for grief that makes you sweat through your elbows, a tea for rage that makes you cry uncontrollably, then nap like a baby deer. A tea for when you feel like you've lost your shadow. She lives in a crooked little house on the edge of the olive groves, surrounded by plants that have never been formally introduced to each other. Her front yard is chaos. Wild mint-fighting fennel, yarrow strangling rose hips, and a lemon tree that smells like it could punch you. She opens the door before you knock. She always does. "You've got the dull eye," she says, squinting at you like she's reading your soul through your pupils. "Third kind. We'll need the purple root." She doesn't ask your name. She doesn't ask about your symptoms. She just ushers you inside and begins boiling water like it's a sacred ritual, which for her it is. Now, while the priests and temple physicians were respected, the real mental health infrastructure of ancient Greece often lay in the hands of these semi-mythical women. They weren't licensed, licensing didn't exist, and they weren't always literate, but they were formidable. Passed down through oral tradition, these women knew what teas to brew for what moods, what smokes to burn, what leaves to chew, and which unfortunate toads to bury under which moon phase. Hippocrates himself, yes, the father of Western medicine, wrote extensively about the humours of the body and how imbalance led to illness, both physical and mental. Black bile was the root of melancholy. Yellow bile bred anger. Phlegm made you sluggish. Blood, oddly enough, caused enthusiasm. These women? They balanced your humours with herbs. And you, dear sufferer, are about to become a walking experiment. The auntie places a small steaming bowl in front of you. "Smells like wet firewood," you say, politely. "Tastes worse," she replies, smiling. "It does. It burns all the way down. Not just your throat, your ears feel warm, your toes buzz, your stomach flips like it's trying to roll a coin. You brace for death, but instead, you cry. Not a little, not one dignified tear. You sob. Loud, snotty, embarrassing sobs. The kind that feel like they've been trapped behind your ribs for months, waiting for the right leaf-based unlocking mechanism. The auntie sits across from you, crocheting something that might be a hat or a very aggressive sock. "Good," she mutters. "Let it out." You do. Over the next 2 hours you vomit once, into a ceremonial bowl, laugh inexplicably 3 times, briefly forget your own name, and confess to stealing a neighbour's pear when you were 9. At the end of it, you fall asleep on a pile of goat-scented pillows and wake up 7 hours later with the clarity of someone who's cried a stone out of their chest. Was it magic? Number it was chemistry. Modern historians and scientists who've studied ancient Greek herbalism have found that many of these plants actually had psychoactive or medicinal effects. Valerian root, for instance, was used to treat anxiety. Pennyroyal could induce sweating and digestive purging. Poppy resin, if you were feeling bold, induced deep sleep and temporary euphoria. These women, without lab coats or scrolls, figured out the building blocks of mental health care one experiment and one patient at a time. And even when their herbs didn't have chemical kick, the ritual itself worked. Because unlike the cold clinicality of temple diagnosis, this was intimate, human. It made you feel seen, not as a vessel possessed by a daemon, but as a whole person, messy, tired, overwhelmed, and worthy of healing. Before you leave, the auntie hands you a sachet of dried herbs. She tells you to brew it when you feel the fog returning. You don't ask what's in it. You just nod. Outside, the olive trees sway in the breeze like a crowd of old philosophers agreeing with each other. You walk home slowly, thoughtfully, lighter, and for the first time in what feels like forever, you look at the horizon, and instead of dread, you feel curiosity. You're not cured, not yet. But today, a woman with 17 T's reminded you that you're not beyond repair. And in ancient Greece, that was healing enough. You're not doing well again. It's not a full relapse, just a creeping echo. The shadows that had started to lift now linger like an awkward guest who won't leave your kitchen. Your chest feels heavier at night. Food tastes like sand. You find yourself staring into fires too long, and once you cried because you stepped on a snail and apologised to it for 15 minutes. So, logically, someone suggests you consult the oracle. You've heard of the oracle, of course. Everyone has. The mouthpiece of the gods, the divine interpreter, the woman who speaks in riddles and gas leaks. You've always thought she was more myth than person, someone you name drop to feel like you're taking action when your life's falling apart. But now, you're desperate. You pack a small pouch with offerings, barley cakes, 2 coins, a lock of your own hair, apparently important, and a carved fig shaped like your spleen. You don't ask questions. Then, you walk. It takes 3 days to reach the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi. You arrive exhausted, blistered, and paranoid that your fig has melted in the sun. The sanctuary is beautiful. Limestone terraces, towering columns, and the faint, constant hum of prayers from every direction. But you don't feel awe. You feel exposed. Because here's the thing. Consulting the oracle isn't a private matter. It's practically a community event. You're told to sit on a bench next to a man who can't stop twitching, and a woman who keeps laughing at rocks. You all wait in silence for your turn, while priests move like bureaucratic honeybees. Finally they call you. You're led into the aditon, the inner sanctum, dim, smoky and heavy with the smell of old herbs and something that might be goat. And then she speaks. The Pythia. She doesn't look like a goddess. She looks like someone's exhausted aunt. Her eyes are red-rimmed. Her robes are a little crooked. Her feet are bare and suspiciously dirty. But when she opens her mouth, she booms, not in volume, in weight. Her words are thick with importance. She says something about rivers and silver fish, and the sound your soul makes when it forgets how to dream. Then she coughs, sneezes, and mutters something about your kidneys. You're simultaneously enlightened and deeply confused. Then she points to the ground. You are to kneel, to bury your hands in the sacred dirt, to feel the earth's memory. You do it. It's warm, softer than expected, like holding a story that's been forgotten for centuries. Now here's what modern historians believe. The Pythia wasn't just a spiritual guide. She was an early form of therapist, cloaked in mysticism, sitting atop a chasm in the earth that may have released psychoactive gases like ethylene, which induces trance states. She spoke in metaphor, guiding seekers towards self-understanding through riddles and ritual. What sounds like divine nonsense was often interpreted by priests into practical advice. You must release the fish became stop clinging to grief. The mountain drinks fire meant your anger is killing you. It was poetry as therapy, confusion as catharsis, and for someone like you, someone unravelling at the seams, it works. Because when everything inside you feels tangled and loud, sometimes you need a stranger with divine authority to look you in the eye and say, your sadness is not failure. It's a message. You leave the aditon with dirt under your nails and a shaky kind of peace in your ribs. You leave the temple in a daze, not because of any divine lightning bolt revelation, but because you've just been told to scream in public as part of your treatment plan. One of the priests escorts you to an amphitheatre behind the sanctuary, not the grand one for tourist and drama festivals, a smaller circular space used for catharsis by vocal release. Basically, the gods want you to let it out. A few others are already gathered. One woman is sobbing into her own elbow. A man is yelling about bees. Someone in the corner is muttering, "It's fine, it's fine, it's fine," in a tone that suggests it is absolutely not fine. You're handed a ceremonial ribbon, blue to symbolise grief, and told to tie it around your arm. "Stand here," a young priest says. "Face that rock. Think of what weighs on you. Then scream." You laugh. The priest does not. So you inhale and do it. The sound surprises you. It's not the tidy, polite shout you imagined. It's raw, cracked, almost inhuman. Your chest shakes. Your legs wobble. Your hands curl into claws without permission. You scream again, louder. This time it feels like something is tearing loose from the inside of your ribs, like a string of invisible knots snapping one by one. You stop when you taste blood in your throat. The group applauds. Because here's the thing. Ancient Greek society expected emotional performance. In theatre, in mourning, even in civic life, there was no shame in public displays of grief, rage, or confusion. Emotional outbursts weren't considered embarrassing. They were essential. Suppressing them was unnatural, dangerous even. Theatre itself was therapeutic. Greek tragedies were designed to create catharsis, not for the actors, but for the audience. You were supposed to cry, to feel, to confront your own fears by watching Oedipus blind himself or Medea spiral into despair. In fact, Aristotle argued that witnessing tragedy helped people purge unhealthy emotions. It was medicine wrapped in drama, an emotional laxative with better lighting. And when professional theatre wasn't available, you did it yourself. You became the drama. Modern psychology now nods to these ideas. Somatic release therapy, trauma-informed vocal work, primal scream therapy. All versions of what ancient Greeks were doing 2,000 years ago, just with fewer ceremonial ribbons and more leather couches. By the end of the ritual you're panting, sweaty, slightly embarrassed, but lighter. One of the attendants hands you a cup of honeyed wine and a fig. You sit on a flat stone under an olive tree, legs stretched out, chest rising and falling like a slow tide. You notice your breath again. You hadn't realised how shallow it had become in recent weeks, like you were trying to disappear by inches. You hear others screaming behind you. Some cries are angry, some sound like mourning, some are downright operatic, and for once it doesn't scare you. Because here, pain is allowed, invited even. Not as weakness, but as evidence of being human. You sip your wine and wipe your nose on your sleeve like a dignified adult. The priest nods at you. "You did well," he says. "You should return next moon." You nod. Not because you're cured, but because you're starting to understand something vital. Healing isn't a one-time thunderclap. It's a collection of odd little moments. Dirt under fingernails, strange tea that makes you cry, and yelling into an amphitheatre until your spleen feels looser. You don't know what tomorrow will feel like, but tonight, you are less alone in your pain. And that, in this strange and sacred world, is enough. You've screamed into the wind, you've drunk the tea, you've buried your emotions in dirt and dug them back up with your face. And yet still, there is a splinter in you. It's not depression exactly. Not anger, not sadness, not even fear. It's a strange mix. Like your insides are full of bees and fog, all buzzing without direction. You're not in crisis. You're just misaligned. So your cousin, always with the unsolicited advice, sends you to a lesser-known healing ritual in a temple dedicated to Hecate. Yes, that Hecate, the goddess of crossroads, ghosts, and questionable decisions made under moonlight. She's not known for her bedside manner. But this temple, this one's different. You arrive at dusk. It's smaller than the grand temples, nestled in a quiet grove where torches hiss, and the air smells like time and things left unsaid. You're greeted not by priests, but by women in deep blue robes who speak so softly, You begin whispering in response without realizing it. They hand you a small lump of clay. Shape your illness, one says. Whatever's inside you, give it a face. You blink. Like sculpt it? Yes, she says. And be honest. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It has to be true. You sit at a stone bench beneath an olive tree and stare at the lump. At first, your hands hesitate, but then they remember. You shape something small, crooked, unblinking, part insect, part child, part cloud. You don't know what you've made, but when you look at it, your stomach flips. That's how you know it's working. One of the robed women inspects it. She nods solemnly and places it in a large shallow bowl lined with ash. Now, she says, confess. The ritual is called apomonema. It means the casting off. This is how it works. You confess your pain to the object. You name it, not just the emotion, but the story, the wound, the rot. You speak aloud in low tones into the night air. You tell the clay about the way your chest tightens when someone asks how you're doing, about the memory that keeps circling your dreams, about the guilt you carry that doesn't even belong to you. And all the while the women chant softly. You don't understand the words. They're old, older than Homer, but the sound vibrates in your ribs. When you're done, they cover your clay creature in herbs, wormwood, bay leaves, and dried petals of the toxic hellebore flower. You step back, and then they set it on fire. The little figure goes up in a flash, not like a slow candle, but like a memory being yanked from your hands. The smoke smells like rosemary and regret. You cry. Again. You're starting to suspect this whole journey is just a creative way to legalize crying in public. But this time, it feels different. Not like a breakdown, like a cleansing. Historically, these kinds of rituals were common throughout ancient Greece, especially in mystery cults and healing temples outside the mainstream Olympian pantheon. The idea was simple but powerful. You externalized your suffering. You gave it form. You witnessed it, then destroyed it. Modern psychology calls this symbolic processing. Jung would have called it shadow work. Your aunt just calls it being dramatic. But here, under the waning moon, it's sacred. After the fire, the women anoint your forehead with oil and hand you a black stone. This is for remembering, one whispers. You don't know what you're supposed to remember, but you nod like you do. Because pretending to understand sacred rituals is half the experience. You walk back through the grove in silence. The stars above are old and indifferent. The cicadas buzz like tiny prophets, and the air for the first time in weeks doesn't feel heavy. It just is. You clutch the stone in your palm and it's warm, not from the fire, from you. And somewhere, in the smudged centre of your soul, something small and stubborn begins to loosen its grip. You're not healed, not entirely. But tonight, you told the truth to a clay monster, and the world listened. And in ancient Greece, that was more than most people ever got. By now, you've learned that healing in ancient Greece has very little to do with privacy, dignity, or logical progression. You've shouted at rocks, whispered to clay, had your pain translated by a possibly stoned oracle. You thought that was the strangest part. But no. Tonight, you're being lowered into a cave. And not just any cave. A sacred healing cavern beneath the sanctuary of Asclepius, the god of medicine. Which sounds promising, until they hand you a sprig of mint, a handful of barley, and a wooden duck carved with disturbingly human eyes. Place it beside your head, the priest says, so your dreams can find you. You stare at the duck. It doesn't blink. Then you lie down on a stone slab that feels suspiciously like it used to be an altar. A thin blanket covers you. Incense smoke curls downward into the dark. Above, in the distance, you hear the faint sounds of chanting, rhythmic, low, repetitive. And then silence. You're alone in the sacred dream chamber. Welcome to enkoimesis. the most famous and most bizarre of all ancient Greek healing rituals. Practiced primarily in the cult of Asclepius, it was essentially divine sleep therapy. But unlike your overpriced modern meditation app, this one involved snakes, hallucinogenic herbs, and sleeping in what was essentially a glorified crawl space under a temple. Here's how it worked. First, the patient, you, would go through ritual purification, fasting, bathing, offering sacrifices, sometimes just cakes, sometimes a whole rooster, and preparing emotionally for what was to come. Then you would be led into the abaton, a quiet, dark, sacred enclosure. There, surrounded by other dreamers, you would sleep and dream. And it was in these dreams that Asclepius himself was said to appear. Sometimes he touched the afflicted part of your body. Sometimes he whispered a cure. Sometimes he handed you a chicken leg and told you to walk into the sea. Interpretations varied, but what mattered wasn't the dream itself. It was the telling. In the morning, you would recount your dream to the priest-therapists above. They would interpret its symbols, divining a diagnosis and treatment from the god's visit. Whether it was herbal poultices, song therapy, or ritual bathing, the message was believed to come directly from the divine. Now back to you. You're lying in the dark, barley tucked into your blanket like some kind of spiritual granola. You breathe in the scent of crushed thyme and unfamiliar oils, and you wait. You doze, wake, doze again. You're not sure how much is real and how much is imagination, but somewhere in the half-sleep a strange thing happens. You feel something. Not a god, not exactly, but a presence, a kind of attention. You see a serpent, not threatening, just there, watching. Its eyes are mirrors. In them you see a version of yourself you haven't met in years, one who isn't afraid of being broken, one who's still laughing. You wake with tears on your face. The priest smiles as you emerge. He leads you to a basin and gently pours water over your hands. You recount the dream. He nods solemnly and hands you a scroll. It's a healing recipe. Olive oil infused with hyssop, wrapped in linen and placed on your chest for 3 nights. You must also sing a hymn to Asclepius while it's applied, loudly, even if your neighbours complain. You take the scroll, because here's the secret. This isn't about medicine. Not in the modern sense, it's about meaning. It's about the ritual of healing, the belief that your suffering matters, that it has a shape, a story, and a cure written in the symbols of your subconscious. Modern historians have long debated how effective these rituals really were. Some point to the placebo effect, to the comfort of communal care, to the psychological power of storytelling. Others scoff, calling it superstition wrapped in ceremony. But what's undeniable is this. It worked for thousands. People walked away from these caves changed, not because Asclepius fixed them, but because they were finally allowed to believe that healing was possible, and that their dreams had something to say. You walk back into the daylight. The scent of mint clings to your clothes. The carved duck rests in your pouch. The cave behind you breathes slowly, like a sleeping god. And for the first time in a long while, you feel like maybe your soul is starting to exhale. You're finally sleeping again. Not like a baby. Babies cry constantly and poop on statues. No, you're sleeping like a tired adult who screamed into a cave and confessed to a clay doll, and made it out the other side slightly less haunted. But something still clings to you. It's not heavy. More like a thin film of dread. That greasy anxiety that shows up in quiet moments and whispers things like, "Remember that dumb thing you said 3 years ago?" You ask the temple healers if they have a treatment for this. They nod solemnly. "You need laughter therapy," one says. You laugh. They do not. Welcome to the ancient Greek tradition of healing through laughter. Yes, that was real. Before modern psychologists started writing papers about the positive impact of comedy on depression, the Greeks had already been implementing humour in formal rituals communal festivals, and even prescribed ceremonies to drive out despair. You're led to a courtyard behind the temple where a makeshift theatre has been set up. And when we say theatre, we mean a few crates for seating, a raised dirt stage, and a man wearing a lion mask and no pants. He roars dramatically. A woman beside him honks a goat bladder. You sit down slowly. This is your therapy now. The performance begins. It's a comedic skit, but not the kind you'd find in a toga-wearing Netflix special. This is ancient flaics, a type of farce originating in southern Italy that eventually spread across the Greek world. Think absurd masks, slapstick violence, exaggerated regional accents and fart jokes carved into marble. One character pretends to be a doctor, another his extremely flatulent patient. They argue about the location of the soul. One says it's in the spleen, the other insists it's in the left buttock. This goes on for 20 minutes. You can't look away. At one point, someone enters dressed as a demigod and is immediately hit with a sheep carcass. And to your horror, you laugh. Not a polite chuckle, a loud, uncontrollable, snort-laced laugh that makes you bend forward and grab your knees. Because here's the truth. This is intentional. The Greeks understood the power of katagolasma, therapeutic ridicule, not just of others, but of the self. Mockery, when done right, was believed to disarm the ego, release tension, and drive out melancholia. In fact, comedic plays were often paired with tragedies during public festivals, so that audiences could cleanse themselves emotionally, purged by grief, then rebalanced by laughter. Even Aristotle wrote that laughter could serve the soul like a pressure valve. Plato, of course, was suspicious of humour. He was always more of a serious toga kind of guy. But the real practitioners of healing laughter, that would be the priests of gelotology, a word you're not making up, from gelos, meaning laughter. Some cults even hosted entire festivals dedicated to joy and absurdity. The Asabai in Thebes was a famous example, a raucous celebration where citizens wore ridiculous masks, sang obscene songs, and mocked their leaders in public. This wasn't rebellion, it was therapy, communal madness, sanctioned absurdity, a day when all social rules bent just enough to let the pressure out. Back in your courtyard, the performance ends with a fake exorcism. The flatulent man releases the demon of sadness through his rear end, which, judging by the audience's reaction, was either improvised or very convincing. You wipe tears from your eyes, your cheeks ache from smiling, but more than that, your chest feels open, like you remembered how to breathe through joy, not just grief. Later that night you speak with one of the temple elders. Why laughter, you ask? Why something so undignified? He thinks for a moment, stroking his beard as if it owes him rent. Because despair thrives in silence, he says, and seriousness is its shadow. But when you laugh, loudly, fully, despair gets embarrassed. It can't hold on. He hands you a scroll, a list of upcoming performances. You notice one features 2 drunk cyclopes and a confused dolphin. You nod, for medical reasons. Modern studies have confirmed what the Greeks suspected. Laughter lowers cortisol, boosts endorphins, improves heart function, and even increases pain tolerance. The ancients didn't have blood tests or EEG machines, but they had crowds, they had experience, and they had the undeniable proof of watching people emerge from these rituals lighter, brighter, more alive. Was it medicine? Absolutely, just not the kind that fits in a bottle. You walk back to your lodging that night still smiling. Not because everything is solved, but because, for the first time in a while, you remembered what it feels like to laugh without guilt. And in the ancient Greek healing world, that was progress. Sleep comes easily. You dream of a goat bladder and a god who giggles, and somewhere in the dark, in your gut, or your soul, or your left buttock, something begins to heal. You wake up with dirt in your ear, That's not a metaphor. There's literally a pebble lodged in your right ear from where you passed out against a fig tree after last night's therapeutic slapstick comedy performance. You are, if nothing else, committed to this healing journey, but today's ritual doesn't involve clay dolls or goat bladders or lion masks. In fact, it doesn't require anything from you at all, except listening. At first, this seems like a trick. You've been stabbed with herbs, buried in ash, shouted at by a drunk woman holding a bronze mirror. Now they just want you to sit? Yes. The priest nods. Sit, breathe, and listen. Tonight, the lyre speaks. Welcome to the ancient Greek use of music as medicine. In Homeric times, music was already seen as more than entertainment. It was a tool, a vessel for divine emotion, a kind of audible incense that moved between the mortal and the divine. Apollo himself, god of healing and music, wielded the lyre like a stethoscope made of song. The Pythagoreans would later say that musical scales mirrored the harmony of the cosmos, that the soul, when unwell, was simply out of tune, and music could retune it. Modern psychologists call this music therapy. The Greeks just called it life. You're taken to a small amphitheatre carved into the hillside, hidden behind olive groves and overgrown laurel. It's barely big enough for 20 people. The stone seats are warm from the day's sun. The air smells like myrrh and anticipation. A young woman in a white chiton walks to the centre. She carries a lyre, its strings strung with what might be horsehair or something uncomfortably sinewy. No one speaks. She doesn't introduce herself. She simply plays. And oh, it hurts how beautiful it is. You didn't know sound could open your chest like that. The notes don't just dance across your ears. They move through your skin, your lungs, your ribs. Each pluck seems to find a part of you forgot existed. You close your eyes, and in that moment, without incense or ceremony, the floodgates open. Your breathing slows. Your jaw loosens. A few tears roll down your cheeks like they've been waiting weeks for this specific note. You're not the only one. Around you people sit in silence, not sombre, but reverent. One man places his hand on his chest. Another rocks gently, not weeping, just dissolving. Historically, music therapy was both spiritual and structured in ancient Greece. The physician Asclepiades of Bithynia, around the 1st century BCE, believed that music could rebalance the body's internal flow, much like tuning an instrument. He wasn't wrong. Modern research confirms that rhythmic tones can lower blood pressure, reduce cortisol and stabilize breathing. Pythagoras went even further. According to later sources, Pythagoras prescribed specific modes, musical scales, for specific ailments. The Dorian mode was said to calm anger. The Phrygian mode could inspire courage. The Lydian, good for melancholy, especially the I'm fine kind that makes people clean obsessively at 3 a.m. Even the epic poets were in on it. In the Iliad, Achilles plays the lyre to soothe his rage after Briseis is taken. Odysseus's return is marked by songs that rekindle memory and identity. Music wasn't background. It was medicine, and in temple healing complexes like Epidaurus, lyre music accompanied both sleep rituals and dream interpretation. Back in your amphitheatre, the lyre fades, but the silence after the music is somehow even louder. It's not empty, it's full, like the echo of something sacred has been poured into the air and just hasn't landed yet. You don't want to speak, no one does. Eventually a small offering bowl is passed. Not for payment, for thanks. People drop in olive leaves, beads, or tiny tokens. You offer a smooth stone you found earlier, warm from your pocket. The woman bows once, and then disappears into the trees. That night your dreams are quieter. You don't fight demons. You don't scream or run or dig your fingers into dirt searching for closure. You just float. You dream of string vibrations, of harmonies that speak a language older than thought. You wake with a kind of clarity you didn't expect. not a solution, but a silence that feels earned, like something inside you finally took a breath after years of holding it. And that in ancient Greece was the point. Healing didn't always need ceremony. Sometimes it just needed resonance, a frequency that matched your grief and soothed it. And so you rise, stretch, and begin your morning with something new in your step. Still bruised, still cracked, but no longer out of tune. It's past midnight. You're lying on a slab of stone, and you're sweating. Not because it's hot, but because the torchlight on the cave walls keeps flickering like it knows something you don't. You were told this would be a healing ritual. What they didn't tell you was that it might involve hallucinating your own death and then getting better from that. You were handed a cup earlier, clay, rough, etched with serpents and olive branches. Inside, a mixture of wine, poppy, and something the priest only described as divine dreaming herbs. They did not elaborate. You drank it because of course you did. You've seen demons in your sleep before. Now apparently you're supposed to look them in the eyes. Welcome to the Greek art of controlled catharsis by dream incubation and conscious hallucination, a practice that modern psychiatry would gently call unlicensed, but the Greeks treated like a visit from the gods. Let's back up. This technique came out of the Asclepian healing cults, those same temples where you previously laid in sacred caves and hoped for symbolic dreams. But in more extreme cases, where patients reported recurring nightmares, internal unrest, or full-on hysteria, more intense methods were used. The theory: your suffering was a trapped daemon, a spiritual force lodged somewhere between your liver and your soul, and to heal it, you didn't banish it. You invited it to show itself. Tonight, you are the vessel, and the ceremony is underway. The cave smells of ash, bay leaf, and something slightly sour. Priests circle above you, not chanting, humming, low, like bees at dusk. A woman sprinkles something into a small brazier nearby. It flares green for a moment. One man waves a palm fan gently beside your head, not to cool you, but to stir the dream. And then it begins. The first vision is subtle. Your fingertips glow faintly, like they've been dipped in moonlight. Then the stone beneath you pulses once, almost like breath. And then the dream opens, not like falling asleep, more like stepping sideways into another reality. You're in a garden, but it's wrong. The sky is the colour of blood oranges. The trees pulse with rhythm. There's music, but it's just out of reach. You hear footsteps, and then it appears. Your demon. Not with horns or fire. It looks like you, only not. Same face, same eyes, but older, sadder, like someone who's made every wrong decision and had to keep living anyway. It looks at you, and says nothing. You were told not to speak. Instead, you sit, and the demon, your mirrored self, sits beside you. You watch the trees. They rustle in a breeze that doesn't exist. The music gets closer, and slowly your demon self smiles, not cruelly, not triumphantly, just knowingly. And then it fades, the dream dissolves. The cave is silent. You are awake. This form of dream confrontation, in Greek called katabasis, or descent, was often dramatized in temples or facilitated by priests using mild psychoactive herbs, like mandrake or poppy-infused wine, to nudge the dreamer into a liminal state. Unlike full sleep therapy, this method was partially conscious. Practitioners believed that suffering, especially emotional pain, was a story your body was trying to tell, and only by meeting the darker aspects of your own myth could you resolve it. Modern parallels: shadow work in Jungian psychology, guided psychedelic therapy, night terrors turned lucid dream journaling. But the Greeks did it by torchlight, surrounded by sacred snakes and old hymns. You rise slowly, the priest nods. Did it speak to you? No, you say, but I think it listened. He smiles. Then the work has begun. You're sent to bathe. Not just for hygiene, it's symbolic. To wash off the residue of the dream, now that the demon has seen the light. As you soak, you stare at your own reflection. It looks a little less haunted, still tired, still tangled in memory, but lighter. This is how the Greeks faced inner torment. Not by denying it, not by drowning it in endless distractions or trying to stay positive, but by welcoming it into the garden, letting it sit beside them, letting it be known, and then, slowly, gently, letting it go. You sleep that night under the stars. For the first time in months, no nightmares come, just music, and something soft humming in your chest that says, you did it. You've been here long enough to stop flinching when someone lights incense or smears goat fat on your forehead. You've made peace with the fact that emotional healing apparently requires rituals that smell like overcooked olives and wine-soaked sandals. But today they hand you a mask. Not a symbolic mask, not an idea or metaphor. An actual painted, terrifying mask. Rigid and oversized, with exaggerated features and bright red cheeks, its mouth permanently locked in a toothy grimace. You hold it up. Is this supposed to be me? The priest nods. You were hoping for a nice herbal soak. Instead, it looks like you're going to act in a one-person tragicomedy about your own unresolved childhood trauma. This is the ancient perspective of Greek psychodrama. Centuries before Freud ever sold his first cigar, the Greeks were treating internal wounds through ritualized theatrical reenactments, complete with costumes, masks, and live audiences, often made up of other temple patients. The idea was simple. You can't always talk your way out of pain. Sometimes you have to externalize it, act it out, give it form, and purge it through performance. This wasn't just drama therapy. This was sacred theatre. You're led to a makeshift stage near the base of the temple, a dusty stone platform surrounded by low amphitheatre steps. Around you sit other patients, temple staff, and a few very intrigued donkeys. A priest hands you a staff and whispers, "You're playing yourself." "How comforting," you mumble. He adds, "But not the you that talks to others, the you that talks to yourself at night." Oh good, that version. You put on the mask, and everything changes. The mask is heavy. You can't see well through the eye slits, but somehow that helps. You don't feel like you, and that's the point. The Greek prosopon, the mask, wasn't just a costume piece. It was a literal transformation device. The name even means face or persona. To wear one was to shed ego and step into a role, often the role of the part of yourself you were too scared to face head-on. Some wore masks of gods, others of ancestors. A few brave souls, they wore masks of the very demons they feared, grotesque visages with bulging eyes, forked tongues, or weeping mouths, and in doing so, they became them. To understand them, to purge them, you take the stage. At first you speak quietly, then louder. The words just come. You talk about being tired, about never feeling enough, about guilt you've carried like a second spine, about dreams that died too early, and memories that still haunt your bones. You scream at the sky. You beg the gods to explain themselves. You mock yourself, cruelly, hysterically, comedically, like one of those absurd masked characters from the Dionysian festivals who spat wine and quoted tragic poetry while mooning the audience. You throw your mask on the ground, you collapse, and it's done. Silence. Then a priest walks over, hands you a cup of water, nods once. The audience, some weeping, some smiling, claps softly. Not for performance, for release. In temple complexes like Epidaurus and Pergamon, reenactment theatre was a staple of emotional cleansing rituals. They called it therapia via mimesis, therapy through imitation. Patients would act out dreams, fears, past traumas, or hypothetical resolutions. Some reenacted the moment they lost a loved one. Others played roles of the people who hurt them, or even the illness itself. By watching their internal demons become external, they gained power over them. It wasn't entertainment, it was exorcism. Afterward, you sit beneath a fig tree, mask resting beside you in the dirt. It's still scary to look at, but not quite as scary as what was behind it. You touch your chest. It feels loose, like someone finally opened a window in your soul and let some air in. In modern times, we call this psychodrama or role-play therapy. It's used for PTSD, grief, anxiety, and addiction recovery. The Greeks didn't have clinical terminology, but they knew something fundamental, that healing isn't always quiet. Sometimes it requires a stage, an audience, and the courage to shout until your ribs hurt. That night you sleep deeply. No dreams, just silence. And in the morning, as you wash your hands in the temple basin, you notice something strange. Your reflection looks familiar. Not like a mask, just you. And for once that feels like enough. The floor is cool against your back. The marble has a faint scent of dust and time, like a tomb and a garden had a baby. You're lying perfectly still, eyes closed, trying not to flinch at the sensation of something alive brushing against your ankle. You've had a lot of strange experiences in this temple. You've been smudged, shouted at, drowned in aromatics, hypnotized by music, and forced to wear your trauma as a mask while pretending to be your own disappointment. But this is new. There is now a snake, an actual sacred slithering snake, moving its scaled body across your shoulder blade with the slow confidence of a priest on a schedule. You've officially entered the reptilian phase of your healing journey, and you're not allowed to scream. In ancient Greece, snakes weren't just tolerated, they were revered, especially in the cult of Asclepius, the god of healing, who was always depicted with a serpent twined around a staff. Yes, that same symbol modern medicine still uses today. The snakes in these temples were not wild intruders, they were residents, cared for, honoured, and, in the case of the most devout sanctuaries, believed to be physical extensions of the god himself. To be touched by a sacred serpent wasn't just symbolic, it was transformative. It meant Asclepius had seen you, and had chosen to let his divine agent taste your suffering. You peek one eye open. The snake is now curled beside your ribs, flicking its tongue rhythmically, like it's testing the air for emotional blockage. The priest nearby hums softly. You're not allowed to pet it. This, they told you, is not a therapy animal. This is an emissary. The ritual is called inerpatismos, the snake encounter. It was reserved for patients who'd failed to receive healing dreams, or who were carrying emotional trauma so deep that only direct divine intervention might help. The idea wasn't that the snake would magically fix you. It was that, by touching you, it would draw out what you couldn't express, like venom from an unseen wound. Historical sources speak of patients lying in abaton chambers, dark, silent sanctuaries built beneath healing temples, where they would fast, pray, sleep, and, in rare cases, await a visit from a sacred serpent. The snakes, likely non-venomous Aesculapian snakes, were kept intentionally calm through food, gentle handling, and low light. But the belief was anything but calm. To those seeking healing, the snake was a living thread between heaven and earth. It moved through silence, through shadows, just like grief. And it didn't ask questions. It just arrived. The snake now moves across your sternum. You feel every muscle in your chest tighten, not from fear, but from memory. You think of the night your mother died, of the argument you never resolved, of the moment you gave up on something because it got too heavy to carry. And then the snake is gone. The priest places a cool cloth over your forehead. You may sit. You don't. Not yet. You breathe. Deeper than before. Something inside you has shifted, and it wasn't just the snake. This wasn't the only example of animal-assisted therapy in ancient medicine. Greeks also used dogs in healing temples, not to bark or comfort, but to lie beside the sick and absorb illness through presence. But snakes were special. They were rebirth. They shed their skin. They symbolized what you could become if you dared let go of what no longer fit. Later, you're given a small offering dish with a carved wooden snake inside. It's a token, a reminder of your visitation. You're told to place it near your bed and whisper to it when nightmares return. You do. That night, you sleep without tossing. In your dream, the snake returns, but it speaks in a voice that sounds like your own, only older, wiser, less afraid. It doesn't offer advice, it just curls around your fears and rests. You wake with a start, not from fear, but from stillness. You stretch. The ache in your back is gone, and for the first time, you don't feel like a cracked vessel waiting to break. You feel like something newly formed, maybe not whole, but mending. You're not sure how you got here. You remember the priest handing you a linen wrap, a small oil lamp, and some advice that sounded a lot like, "Don't die in your dream." Helpful. Now you're lying in what can only be described as a divine waiting room for the unconscious, an abaton, or inaccessible chamber deep inside the temple. It's lit by flickering torches. The air smells of rosemary, sweat, and philosophical tension. You're not alone. A few others lie in spaced-out alcoves nearby, wrapped like sleepy mummies, mumbling in their sleep or twitching softly. Somewhere down the corridor, someone is snoring with the conviction of a man possessed. You've officially entered the ancient Greek tradition of incubation therapy, or, as they like to call it, enkoimesis, healing by sleeping on it, literally. Let's break it down. The Greeks believed dreams were not random brain static or subconscious memes. They were divine transmissions, straight from the gods or the spirits of healing ancestors. But to receive a healing dream, you had to be ready. And by ready they meant fasted for at least a day, bathed in sacred water, prayed, chanted, and possibly cried in public, smeared with oils or herbs of unclear origin, rubbed down with garlic, seriously, and then left in a dark stone room to see what happens. If you were lucky, you'd dream of Asclepius himself, often described as a tall man with a serpent staff and a dad bod that radiated eternal wisdom. He might touch your wound in the dream, or whisper a riddle into your ear, or, in one documented case, operate on you with a golden saw made of sunlight. The message didn't always make sense, but if you woke up with less pain and the urge to start eating olives again, the therapy was considered a success. Back in the chamber, you're trying to sleep. You've rotated positions 4 times. Left side, too bony. Right side, snake memory flashbacks. On your back, immediate existential crisis. Eventually you drift off, and the dream begins. You're standing in a field. But the field is floating. Olive trees hang upside down from a sky the colour of honey-soaked wine. A man appears, or maybe a goat. It's unclear. He has sandals and glowing eyes and keeps muttering something about finding you're in a column. You ask what that means. He turns into a snake, then into your father, then into a loaf of barley bread. You wake up sweating with the urge to start painting or screaming or both. Congratulations. You've received a therapia oniris, a healing dream. You will now report this vision to a dream interpreter, a specialist priest trained in the subtle art of figuring out what your subconscious and or the gods are trying to tell you via goat imagery. "Ah," he says the next morning after hearing your tale. "Clearly this means you must bathe in running water, sleep with a bay leaf under your tongue, and avoid onions for a lunar cycle." You nod solemnly as if that made any sense, and then, because it's Greece, you do it, and you feel better, because belief is part of the cure. Historical records from temples like Epidaurus, Labina, and Pergamon are filled with inscriptions from grateful patients describing their dream healings. Asclepius appeared, cut open my leg, removed black bile, and sewed me with golden thread. I awoke whole. I dreamed I was chased by a bull. Then I awoke and no longer feared my father. I saw a woman pour milk into my ears. Now I hear again. Yes, real testimonials. No, modern medicine has not figured out how to duplicate ear milk cure yet. But here's the interesting part. Even when the dreams didn't fix people physically, they often helped emotionally. Patients who've been paralysed by fear, grief or anxiety reported feeling lighter, clearer, even euphoric after their dream encounters. It wasn't the logic of the dream that mattered. It was the experience, the symbolic confrontation with a part of themselves too wild or wounded to face directly while awake. Dream therapy was the ancient version of going to a silent retreat, journaling your nightmares, and waking up with the urge to rearrange your life and hug a tree. Only with more snakes. You leave the Abaton with sore knees and the vague memory of flying. Your interpreter gives you a prescription. Walk barefoot on earth for 3 days. Speak your fears into a clay pot. Then break the pot and bury the shards at dawn. You do all of it. You feel ridiculous. But also reborn. That night your dreams are silent, but your heart isn't. And for once it beats without the background hum of dread. Just breathe. Just warmth. Just sleep. There's something strange about crying in a circle with strangers. It's humbling, vulnerable, oddly comforting. And in this temple it's also considered a sacred ritual. You're sitting cross-legged in a semicircle of fellow pilgrims, all of you wrapped in linen tunics that smell faintly of ash and medicinal herbs. A priestess is lighting juniper resin on a small altar in the centre. No one speaks, yet somehow everything is already being said. You've officially entered the ancient Greek practice of catharsis en koinonia, emotional purification through shared ritual, or, to put it in modern terms, group therapy, but with drums and fewer boundaries. This isn't just a prayer circle, it's a structured healing event. Participants have come here to witness one another's pain, and to release their own in the presence of others. There are no chairs, no tissues, and certainly no passive note-taking therapists in cardigans. There is fire, there is chanting, there is ritualized sobbing, and sometimes there is a goat. We'll get to that. The idea was simple. Pain that is held in isolation becomes poison. But when pain is shared, acknowledged, sung about, screamed about, or released through communal rhythm, it becomes sacred. And so, in healing temples like those at Epidaurus, Kos and Delphi, priests organized regular emotional purification rites, where groups of patients would gather to unburden together. The process usually included opening prayers to Asclepius or Apollo, rhythmic chanting to unify breath and voice, a sharing phase where people confessed fears, regrets, losses, or soul maladies, a symbolic release, like breaking a clay object, burning herbs, or shaving off a lock of hair. And sometimes, yes, a goat would be led into the circle and symbolically carry away the pain when released, or sacrificed, depending on the day. It was loud, messy, beautiful. You're invited to speak. Your throat tightens. At first, all you can say is, "I'm tired." A few others nod. "I miss someone." More nods. "I'm scared I'm becoming the worst version of myself." Silence. Then a soft chant rises. It's not words, just a sound. A hum. A frequency of shared sorrow. Someone begins to weep. Another clutches a handful of olive leaves and mutters a prayer. You close your eyes and feel it wash over you. It's not catharsis by confession. It's catharsis by witnessing. In Greek thought, catharsis wasn't just an emotional reset. It was spiritual hygiene. Aristotle defined it as the cleansing of pity and fear through art, particularly in tragedy. But the Asclepian temples took it one step further. Healing didn't just happen on the stage. It happened in the heart, in the ritual, in the collective. Modern psychologists would later echo this, pointing to mirror neurons and the therapeutic effect of group processing, especially in trauma recovery. The Greeks, they just knew it felt right, that you could cry with strangers and come out feeling more like yourself than you had in years. At the end of the ritual, the priestess passes you a small clay dish. You're told to whisper your grief into it. You do. Then you place it in the fire. It cracks. So does something inside you, and it feels good. You spend the rest of the evening in quiet. No one talks much afterward. Not out of discomfort, but reverence. You feel light, not healed, not yet, but no longer buried beneath the weight of silence. And sometimes that's the start. Oh, and about the goat? It didn't make a sound. It just stood in the circle with you, blinking slowly, like it had seen 1,000 heartbreaks and would see 1,000 more. Then it was led away back into the hills. Maybe it was symbolic, maybe it was therapeutic, maybe it just liked being included. You'll never know. You're barefoot again. Of course you are, but the grass is wet, the air is crisp, and you're being led down a path lined with olive trees that whisper things like, "It's going to be cold, and this is the weirdest spa day of your life." A priest ahead of you carries a jug of spring water, cradled like it might explode. You're not in a temple anymore, you're in nature, and nature here is sacred. Today, you're about to be washed. Not scrubbed, not bathed, ritually cleansed. Because whatever psychic gunk you're carrying, the ancient Greeks believed it could cling to your soul like sweat in a linen tunic, and there's only one way to rinse it off: katharmos, the original mind-body detox. In Greek healing rituals, katharmos wasn't optional. It was the first step in nearly every therapeutic, religious or mystical process. Had a nightmare? Take a purification bath. Felt haunted by guilt? Splash some sacred water on it. Showed up to the temple still emotionally crusty from your failed goat-based group therapy? You guessed it. Into the river you go. But here's the twist. It wasn't about hygiene, at least not physical hygiene, it was spiritual. The Greeks believed that miasma, a kind of invisible spiritual pollution, could cling to a person after contact with death, illness, grief, sin, or even just too much bad luck. Left unchecked, this miasma could block divine communication, cause ailments, and even contaminate sacred spaces. The cure: wash it off. With water blessed by the gods, fetched at dawn, preferably cold enough to make you doubt your life choices. And that brings us to you. Standing on the riverbank in your ceremonial wrap, teeth chattering as a temple attendant pours a bowl of icy spring water over your head. You gasp so loudly a frog nearby jumps into the reeds. This is not a spa treatment. This is emotional exorcism, ancient Greek style. The water is collected from a krine, a spring or natural fountain considered sacred, often dedicated to a specific deity or nymph. You're told this particular one flows from a rock Apollo struck with his lyre, or maybe it was Artemis. Either way, the water is pure, cold, and rumoured to whisper secrets to birds. Some healing temples had indoor basins filled with this living water. Others required patients to journey into the hills, fast, chant, and submerge themselves before returning to the Abaton for dream healing. You've skipped the fasting, but the water is definitely doing something. You're now fully soaked and wide awake in a way that feels more spiritual than caffeinated. A priest begins a chant. He walks in a slow circle around you, sprinkling more water, then olive leaves, then something that smells like lemon and possible judgment. You're told to name the thing you're releasing, and you hesitate. "Fear," you whisper. He nods, not unkindly, then dumps another bowl over your head. You begin to understand why the Greeks worshipped gods of both reason and chaos. There's precedent for all of this. Texts from ancient healing centres, particularly Epidaurus and Kos, describe purification rituals involving washing in seawater or sacred springs, anointing with oils afterward to seal the cleansing, walking barefoot on specific stones believed to absorb negative energy. whispering one's grief into the wind, preferably at a crossroads. And yes, bathing at specific lunar phases for maximum emotional exfoliation. Hippocratic medical texts even mention hydrotherapy, water treatments for mental imbalance, fever dreams, and melancholia. Modern science would later link cold water immersion to improved mood, reduced inflammation, and a sudden spike in "what the hell am I doing" adrenaline clarity. The Greeks just knew it worked, and sometimes that's enough. Later you're handed a thick cloth and a fig leaf for dignity. You sit in the sun, steaming slightly, heart pounding in that post-ritual rhythm that feels suspiciously like healing. Someone brings you warm honey water. Another offers a date wrapped in bay leaf. You feel human again. No, not just human, cleansed. Like your sadness has been washed off your bones. Like your demons don't know how to swim. You look back at the spring. It flows endlessly, rippling around stones, nourishing reeds, whispering to birds, still cold, still ancient. They say water remembers. You hope it forgets what you screamed into it. But even if it doesn't, you're different now. Lighter. You may not be healed, but you're ready to be. You're seated in a massive stone amphitheatre carved into the side of a hill, surrounded by thousands of people. And when we say thousands, we mean 14,000. A packed house of tunic-wearing, olive-snacking, sandal-clad citizens, all here for the same thing, to cry loudly, together, and to feel spiritually better afterward. You're at the Theatre of Dionysus in Athens, the birthplace of Western drama, and possibly your emotional undoing. It's the start of the City Dionysia, a multi-day festival dedicated to Dionysus, god of wine, ecstasy, and theatrical catharsis. Yes, the same Dionysus who encouraged people to get drunk and dance in forests is now hosting a state-sponsored trauma processing retreat via performance art. Tickets, free for citizens, dress code, minimal, emotional preparation, inadequate. You have no idea what's coming. The chorus enters. They chant in unison, their voices booming across the ancient stone seats. Then the actor steps out, in a towering mask, platform shoes and robes that make him look like a philosophical wind turbine. He begins to speak, and within 10 minutes you realise that this play is about you. Well, not literally you, but everything you're feeling. The shame, the guilt, the love lost, the injustice you carry in your stomach like a rock. All of it is playing out in front of you, and you are not emotionally ready. This isn't popcorn cinema. This is full-blown emotional autopsy, conducted in iambic verse. And the Greeks believed this experience had healing power. They even had a name for it. Catharsis. Let's rewind. Aristotle, in his famous work Poetics, argued that tragedy cleansed the soul of pity and fear, the two emotional gremlins that, when left unprocessed, could lead to madness, violence, or making deeply questionable life choices. See Oedipus Rex. He wrote that by watching a tragic story unfold on stage and feeling those emotions safely from a distance, the audience could achieve a kind of emotional purging. Basically, instead of bottling it up and taking it out on your neighbour's goat, you'd cry in a crowd, go home lighter and sleep like a baby philosopher. Back in your seat, it's working. You're sobbing quietly while watching a masked actor realise he accidentally married his mother and stabbed out his own eyes. The guy next to you passes you a fig. You nod in mutual devastation. Somewhere nearby, a woman yells, "I knew it," during dramatic plot twist. The experience is raw, intense, weirdly healing. What made this therapy? It wasn't just the drama. It was the shared emotional experience. Everyone in that theatre brought their own demons. Grief, fear, trauma, longing. And for a few hours they laid them down like cloaks across the stone benches and watched them mirrored on stage. Tragedy made the unspeakable speakable, and in a society where public stoicism and male emotional repression were the norm, theatre became the one place where you could sob, clutch your chest, and openly grieve for lost loved ones, while claiming you were just appreciating the artistry. And it wasn't all blood and tears. After the tragedies came the comedies, which were chaotic, vulgar, political, and often involved giant props shaped like things not approved for daytime statues. Laughter too was part of the healing. Together, tragedy and comedy formed a kind of ancient emotional roller coaster, designed to wring you out, break your walls down, and maybe leave you in a puddle of reflection by sunset. You walk out of the theatre hours later. The sun is lower, your eyes are red. Your heart, however, feels weirdly intact, like someone found the crack in your chest and sang into it. You overhear a stranger muttering about fate. Another swears he saw his own father in the lead actor's face. Someone else jokes that at least they didn't marry their mum. The whole city is emotionally hungover, but also closer. This was never just about plays. It was about processing together. The Greeks understood something we're still catching up to, that art isn't a luxury, it's a survival tool, a mirror, a medicine, and sometimes a good cry. Tomorrow you'll go back to the temple, but tonight you lie awake on a woven mat under a fig tree thinking about stories, wounds, and how strange it is that pain feels lighter when it's worn like a mask and sung in verse. You're healing, not in silence, but in sound. The first thing you hear is a soft plucking of strings, not the dramatic strum of a guitar solo, more like a thoughtful tickle, curious, hesitant, like a musician asking your soul for permission to enter. You've just woken up in a healing temple, but instead of being greeted with herbs or chants or goat-based shadow puppetry, there's just this, a lone musician sitting by your sleeping mat, gently playing a lyre. You blink at him. He nods. You try to speak. He motions to stay quiet and continues playing. Because here, in the sacred practice of musical healing, the first step to mental recovery is not talking, it's listening. To the ancient Greeks, music wasn't some background Spotify playlist for your temple massage. It was divine frequency, a language older than words, more precise than emotion, and powerful enough to realign the soul. They called it harmonia, the belief that the universe, the body and the mind were all governed by a cosmic rhythm. If your soul was out of sync, you didn't need a doctor. You needed a new soundtrack, and that's where you come in. You've been feeling off, heavy, uneasy, dreams full of shadows, a buzzing in your bones that herbs haven't cured. So you're here, in the Asclepion of Pergamon, lying on a mat made of woven reeds, undergoing what would later be called music therapy, but with fewer textbooks and more reed flutes. The lyre player beside you adjusts his strings. He plucks a soft, looping pattern in a minor key. Somehow it sounds like your sadness, but prettier. Across the room, a second musician joins with an aulos, a double-reeded flute that sounds like a medieval oboe, and an angry duck had a surprisingly spiritual child. They play together in a slow, deliberate harmony, and slowly your chest loosens. This wasn't just poetic nonsense. Greek physicians, including Pythagoras, yes, the triangle guy, believed that music had quantifiable effects on the human psyche. He theorized that certain musical intervals could restore cosmic balance inside a person. Basically, your vibe could be tuned. Pythagoras and his followers used instruments to treat anxiety, rage, even hangovers. They recommended specific modes, scales, for specific ailments. Feeling brave? Play the Dorian mode. Feeling frisky? Go Phrygian. Feeling sleepy? Try Hyperlydian. It was less pick a playlist and more prescribe a scale. The concept of ethos, the moral and emotional character of music, was core to this philosophy. According to Plato, music had the power to shape the soul and the state. In the Republic, he warned that the wrong music could destabilize a society, which, to be fair, is kind of how some people still feel about EDM. Back in the temple, your musician has moved on to a melody in Lydian mode. Bright, hopeful, with an upward lilt that makes your fingers twitch like they might someday dance again. You didn't realise how heavy you'd become until the music began to lift you. No words, no pressure, just vibrations. Not all sessions were solo. Some involved choral singing, especially in temples of Apollo, the god of music and healing. Groups would hum, chant, or sing together in structured tones designed to sync hearts and minds. The Greeks were pioneers of the concept that sound could be somatic, experienced physically as much as mentally. Modern science would eventually catch up. Today we know music can reduce cortisol, stress hormone, stimulate dopamine, pleasure, even synchronize heartbeats during group singing. But the Greeks? They knew it felt right. And they never needed a control group. You spend the rest of the session in stillness. When the music ends, no one claps. You simply nod. Your mind is quieter, not empty, just tuned, like the static's been cleared. The musician rises. You want to thank him. He only smiles and says, "Next time we try percussion." You're not sure if he's joking, but part of you hopes he isn't. Later, you walk through the temple gardens and hear someone softly singing a hymn to Apollo. A child nearby taps a stone rhythmically with a stick, eyes closed in deep concentration. It's everywhere, this healing through harmony. Not loud, not dramatic, just ever-present, invisible medicine. You still have questions about your pain, your purpose, your past. But for the first time in weeks, they don't feel like enemies. They feel like notes in a melody you're learning to hum along to. Maybe healing doesn't always come in revelations. Maybe sometimes it comes in the pause between two notes. You're lying flat on a cool stone floor, wrapped in a linen sheet that smells faintly of thyme and old incense. Your stomach is empty, your bladder is definitely not, and there's a suspicious hissing sound in the dark to your left. This is all perfectly normal. You're participating in enkoimesis, the ancient Greek practice of dream incubation. In other words, you're here to sleep your trauma away. Literally. No pressure. The room you're in is deep within a temple to Asclepius, god of healing and medicine. You've spent the last few days preparing, fasting, bathing in sacred water, sacrificing a loaf of barley bread shaped like a liver, and reciting hymns until your voice cracked. All of this leads here, the Abaton, a restricted area where only initiates are allowed to spend the night in search of a healing vision. But visions don't come cheap. They demand discomfort. So here you are, hungry, anxious, cold, and highly aware that the hissing was probably not your imagination. That's because you're not alone. This healing ritual also involves snakes, specifically the Aesculapian snake, a non-venomous variety sacred to Asclepius. These snakes roam the temple freely, slithering among the sleeping pilgrims like scaly nurses on night shift. Their presence is said to aid healing. Sometimes they lick your wounds, sometimes they curl up beside you, sometimes they just knock over your water jar. You try not to flinch. The idea is simple, if slightly insane. By entering a state of ritual sleep in a holy place, the god Asclepius will visit you in a dream and offer a vision, a cure, or at the very least some divine insight into your suffering. This wasn't fringe stuff. This was mainstream medicine for centuries. The Asclepian temples, found in places like Epidaurus, Pergamon and Kos, were ancient wellness resorts where thousands came each year to be healed by sacred rest. And let's be honest, the idea that you could sleep your problems away wasn't just tempting, it was revolutionary. According to ancient inscriptions, people were cured of everything from blindness and paralysis to migraines and kidney stones after a night of divine slumber. Here's a real one from Epidaurus. Ambrosia from Athens was blind in one eye. She slept in the temple and saw a dream. The god came and rubbed medicine into her eye. In the morning, she woke seeing clearly. Another inscription describes a man with an infected toe being amputated in his dream by the god, and waking up healed. No pain, no blood, just dream surgery. You, of course, are still awake. Because dream therapy, like modern therapy, does not operate on your schedule. You try counting snakes. 1, 2, maybe 3, unless one circled back. The air is thick with silence. And then you begin to drift. You don't remember falling asleep, but suddenly you're walking through a moonlit courtyard. Olive trees sway in rhythm. The stars blink in time with your breath. Everything smells like honey and crushed laurel. A man appears, long beard, gold robes, and eyes that glow like embers. He places a hand on your chest. You feel heat. He says nothing, but you understand. You've been seen. Then he vanishes. You wake. Was it real? Was it metaphor? Was it just your brain trying to process last week's existential breakdown via mythology? It doesn't matter, because you feel different, lighter, quieter, less like a cracked pot and more like a sealed jar with just a few dents. And in ancient Greece that counted as progress. The temple staff, priests, priestesses and semi-trained dream interpreters gather in the morning to help translate your vision. You explain what happened. They nod solemnly. They write something on a wax tablet. They hand you a recommendation. Spend 7 days walking the sacred grove. Avoid loud noises. Eat goat cheese. Do not touch bronze. And you do. Because why not? Modern historians look back on enkomesis with a mix of admiration and disbelief. On one hand, it was primitive sleep therapy mixed with psychosomatic suggestion, powerful symbolism, and just enough mysticism to engage even the most skeptical minds. On the other hand, it was free healthcare, if you didn't mind sharing your bedroom with snakes. Today's therapists use tools like EMDR, CBT, or guided meditation. The Greeks used ritual sleep in sacred spaces, wrapped in myth, memory, and moonlight. And sometimes it worked. You leave the temple a few days later. The snake never bit you. The dream never left you. And your soul, while still a little tangled, no longer feels so heavy. You can't explain it, but you don't need to. Because sometimes healing isn't about logic. Sometimes it's about being still long enough for something older than words to whisper. You're going to be okay. You've come a long way. Not just across the stone floors of healing temples or through nights of snake-assisted dreaming. You've made the full arc, from demons to diagnosis, from incense to insight. And tonight, you're back in the agora, the beating heart of Greek public life, watching two men argue so intensely about the human soul that one of them is literally sweating into his beard. This is philosophy in ancient Athens. It's loud, it's personal, and if you're not careful, you'll learn something that changes the way you understand yourself forever. Across the centuries, all the bizarre rituals you've endured, the purgative herbs, the ritual baths, the chanting therapy circles, the dream incubation chambers, they weren't just mystical fluff. They were the early scaffolding of psychotherapy. No couches, no clipboards, just a stubborn, brilliant society trying to figure out why people lose their minds and how to get them back. And tonight you're watching that idea mature. Let's rewind. The Greeks had always believed in invisible forces, gods, spirits, demons, the good kind, and sometimes bad things that just happen to people without reason. But somewhere around the 5th century BCE, philosophers like Hippocrates, Plato and Aristotle began asking dangerous questions. What if mental illness wasn't divine punishment? What if it was natural? What if a troubled mind was just a sick mind? Hippocrates, yes, that Hippocrates, is often credited as the father of medicine, but he might as well be the grandfather of psychology. He argued that mental illness stemmed not from vengeful gods, but from imbalances in the 4 bodily humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. If your humours were off, so was your mind. Melancholy, too much black bile, mania, excess yellow bile, anxiety, possibly damp lungs, or living in Sparta. While these theories are, let's say, not quite peer-reviewed, the real magic was in the shift. From spiritual punishment to natural causation, from exorcism to observation, from divine judgment to human understanding. It was the earliest whisper of modern mental health care, whispered in the columns of lecture halls, echoed in healing temples, and sung in choruses beneath the Acropolis. Plato took it a step further. He suggested that the soul had parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. If one got too strong, say, appetite, you'd become impulsive, gluttonous, or irrational. Therapy, then, was the practice of internal harmony, of aligning your parts like a well-tuned lyre. Sound familiar? Modern cognitive behavioural therapy says something similar. Identify the thoughts driving your behaviour and bring them into balance. Plato just said it with more robes. Aristotle, ever the pragmatist, observed that emotions like anger and fear weren't sins. They were natural responses. He believed that virtue came from moderation, not repression. And in doing so, he opened the philosophical floodgates for later thinkers to ask, how do we actually help someone with mental suffering? And more importantly, how do we listen? By the time of the Roman Empire, these ideas had evolved even further. The physician Galen, 2nd century CE, combined Hippocratic medicine with psychological insight, writing detailed case studies about emotional suffering, personality types, and even what we now recognise as trauma. He wasn't just asking what hurts, he was asking, why do you feel this way? And how does your past affect your present? So basically, Galen was one fainting couch away from charging 200 drachmas an hour. Fast forward a couple millennia, and modern psychology would finally slap a name on all of this. Psychosomatic illness, emotional regulation, cognitive restructuring, group therapy, narrative processing, mindfulness. You did all of these, just in sandals. You've danced with demons, bled on altars, chanted into fire, poured out grief in temple halls, slept under moonlight waiting for a god's whisper, and somehow all of that ended here, in a culture that took your soul seriously enough to experiment, adapt, and try to make it whole. They didn't always get it right. They had no DSM-5, no neuroimaging, no liability waivers, but they had something that most ancient societies lacked: curiosity. A belief that madness wasn't just misfortune, it was a puzzle to be understood. As you sit on the temple steps one last time, watching the sky darken over the marble skyline, you realise something. This journey didn't fix you, it revealed you, layer by layer, ritual by ritual, and in that unravelling, there was healing. Because whether you're screaming into the void or journaling in a therapist's office, the point is the same. You're trying, you're showing up, and sometimes that's enough. If you've made it this far, still awake or peacefully drifting off, I just want to say thank you. Let this be your soft landing. The world is quieter now. And somewhere, under the stars of ancient Greece, your soul hums in tune. Not perfect, not fixed, but finally heard. Sleep well.